So I'm Nate. I'm here with Temple of Geek, here to talk about Oni, the Thunder God. And why don't you tell me a little bit about yourselves and who you are?
I am Sara Sampson. I am the producer of Oni.
I'm Daisuke. I'm the director of Oni, Thunder God's Tale.
And creator as well, correct?
Creator, yes.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me, so the story of Oni, the Thunder God, it has a lot of mythical characters in it and a lot of different aspects. Why don't you tell me how you came up with the characters and the world that they live in?
Well, I was born and raised in Japan. I migrated to the United States close to 30 years ago now, and I always wanted Japanese culture represented in the Hollywood filmmaking, hopefully through Japanese, authentic Japanese voice. So this was our opportunity to tell a Japanese story, by a Japanese person. But truthfully, it was so interesting to know that the concept of Oni, Oni is always the bad guy in Japanese folklore, but the concept, there is a theory that Oni might have been the representation of foreigners or indigenous people who looked different from local Japanese people back in ancient days. And I thought that was so symbolic of the world we live in today. We all fear people we don't know. We all fear cultures we don't understand. And when things get aggressive, the fear turns into aggression, and then you turn them into bad guys. And if that's the concept of Oni, we have to tell the story today and see how we can learn from this, what Oni really means.
Yeah, and I guess going on that, I see what you mean early on, because he comes in with his daughter as a child, and just a baby, and they know nothing about him other than that he's a father trying to take care of his child. And why don't you tell me a little bit about Onari and her pursuit to find her Kushi? Or did I say that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, man.
I'll try that.
Well, Onari is so wild. She's the type of girl that I really relate to. I feel like she's never brushed her hair a day in her life. That was me growing up. But, Onari is trying to find out how she fits in this world, and she sees her classmates, rising to success. They're getting their powers, and yet she's the only one, right, and her best friend Kappa, who haven't received their powers yet. And we learned that you receive your Kushi from your parents. It's hereditary. And so she immediately sets out on this journey to figure out what kind of powers her dad has, because she hasn't seen anything to date. And so it's this fun challenge, but also frustrating struggle for her to try to understand a little bit more about who her father is and understand her heritage, and in turn that helps her on this journey of ultimately finding out who she is.
How did you come up with as far as the classmates, how did you come up with the other characters in the show? Like we have a duck with water in his head, and we have an umbrella. Like there are a bunch of really fun characters. What was the process in creating them?
Thank you. I mean, that's one thing that's so unique and fascinating about Japanese folklore. We have this belief in Japan called Yaoyorozu no Kami, which means 8 million gods in Japanese. And basically, it's the philosophy of animism that we are very familiar with in Japan. Every single object, anything around you possesses souls or the lives or the spirit. And so it's not just the humans, but also animals or nature or umbrella and and vegetables. So we had a huge wealth of inspiration to draw from in Japanese folklore. And of course, we had to put our own spin to it just to make a really interesting dynamic between those classmates.
I found it very, speaking of the vegetables, I found it amusing early on when they had the bento boxes and had vegetables in the bento boxes with faces on them as well. So the show is very, not just, though it's animated, it's very cinematic. And so what was the direction with going that route to being very, very movie-like versus very child animation-like, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, we all, most of us come from features. Dice and I started out working in features. A lot of leadership at the studio come from features. And I feel like in this case in particular, we really let the story drive us and take us on this journey, right? So we know that we want to explore this big, big theme. And instead of putting a runtime on it, we try to let the story navigate and show us, how much time do we really need. And then in partnering with Netflix, of course, we decided to break it up into 4-part chapters. But in terms of the cinematic quality, of course, we're going to push for quality. That's what we love, that's what we know. And it's a big, big shout out to our crew who really put themselves and their passion into making every detail shine. And I think the finished result is something beyond what we ever thought would be possible in the beginning.
How did you come up with settling on the animation style for the show?
So this project started off as a stop motion project at first. We felt, as I talked earlier, the Japanese folklore, just giving life to every single object felt such a fit for stop motion, just giving life to the puppets and stuff. However, as the story kind of grew cinematic, dramatic, and just big, we felt we had to use the medium we're most comfortable with in CG. While we made everything CG, we tried to capture that feeling we loved when we created the stop motion pilot. The feeling that you can touch, feeling that you are in this world, not like made by a computer, but the people's hands. We tried our best to try to emulate that. And at the end of the day, as much as we love and respect Disney, Pixar, style of animation, that's where we come from. We wanted to embrace the talent we worked with in Japan, and that is just almost taking the limitation as their advantage, and then just try to push the movement as very limited, but then hopefully striking really strong poses instead of like flowy movement, and try to find something a little bit new, a little bit different.
Yeah, and I hope you take this as a compliment as well, because I'll admit while watching it, I took a good minute, was like, is this computer animation or is it stop motion? Because I see what you're talking about. You did retain the stop motion aspect of it, and it looked really, I think you did a really great job at that, and also the rendering of the CG that you guys had was to the quality where I did question if it was stop motion. So please take that as a compliment.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry,
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we had an amazing production partner, many production partners in Japan, but Megalith VFX really helped us craft this final look in CG. So thank you so much for saying that. They will be thrilled to hear.
And especially with, I'm sorry, I forgot Oni's name. It started with an N.
Naridon?
Naridon. Especially with his hair. And when Onari, when she's like on top of it or pops in and out of it, like the animation of her hair, it did look very realistic and wiry versus computer animated.
I think one thing, we're so happy that people are responding to the hair in our animation, because normally in CG, hair requires a very expensive simulation. We didn't do any of that. Everything was modeled, so it looked like a really beautifully realistic and believable, but we didn't do the classic computer sort of programming of a simulation, mainly because this is a series, restrictions of budget and schedule from the series, but we didn't think it was necessary because our animators were able to still move very minimally to convey the softness and the believability and the delicateness of their hair.
And the lighting and the textures that were used in it were really great as well. Were there any sequences that you found very difficult to animate for the show?
That's a good one. I think in chapter 4, have you seen all chapters?
I didn't get to chapter 4, but go ahead.
Okay, there's a scene. It's a very emotional scene. We call it PB&J.
I was thinking, yeah.
Oh my gosh! And guys, I think you should set this up. But it took. It was a big challenge. It was a big challenge to. It's when we see our main character Onari in her most vulnerable state, and trying to evoke that emotion in the most authentic way, and giving ourselves enough time. But like you said, also making sure that we're hitting those key poses. It took a lot of thought and energy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the most. The sort of quiet moment. It's not usually like difficult animation shots are the ones with the big camera movement and lots of characters and a lot of movements. But in this moment, there's so little movement. But we wanted to convey this powerful emotion that our character is going through. And our animation supervisor, Toshi Nakamura, just pulled it off just beautifully. And it is definitely my favorite scene in the whole film.
That's great. How did you guys settle on and come to and settle on the cast for voicing your characters and bringing them to life?
Oh man, that was a wonderful journey. We had incredible casting directors, so we really just tried to do a deep dive and like understand ourselves, like who these characters are, but also leave enough space to whoever we cast, let them plus and enhance that character just the same. We found Mamona Tamada. She plays Onari, and she started when she was only 14, but she brought this incredible range and emotional depth to Onari. She took Onari to places we didn't think possible, and that was that was incredible to get her. And then of course Craig Robinson, who plays Naridon, he had a very fun challenge doing this project. Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about casting Craig?
I mean, Naridon doesn't necessarily speak. I mean, he has his own language, but all he says is "nah."
Yeah.
And Craig, not only he's an amazing actor and comedian, but he's a musician. So the fact that he's musical felt really appropriate for this role. We're very surprised that he not only accepted this role, but also he was patient with us, because hours of recording, not, like, I was so worried he would get mad, but he definitely just gave everything he could to capture the range of emotion of this main character who only has one word to say, and that is definitely because of Craig. Because it's not language-based dialogue, he's the only character, and Naridon is the only character that we use Craig Robinson's voice for all the regions. So 31 languages is translated, but in Craig is...
It's always Craig.
Always Craig.
Always credited.
Yeah.
So Naridon obviously is not very verbal, and I know you mentioned earlier that Oni might be just an outsider or something. Was it intentional to make him nonverbal so he can't communicate and kind of leave him outcasted?
I think you really brought this unique perspective, Dice, as a father, and made me think about this too in my own relationship, with my parents. I feel like Naridon and Onari, it's like this gap of communication that every child and parent experience, right? You want to so deeply connect and understand each other, but it's so challenging, and I think it's just so perfectly portrayed by the fact that Naridon can't communicate in the traditional way, right? He has to communicate through food, through play, through dance, and that is how he forms this deep bond with his daughter.
I did actually enjoy her friend, I forget his name, my apologies, the duck character, was pointing out that, oh yeah, your dad is different, but he's still a dad, he farts, and they're the stinkiest farts, and, like, he's with you, and just kind of pointing out the memorable and kind of important roles that your parents have in your life that you might take for granted without realizing it, even if they're farts.
Thank you.
What went into scoring this film?
Thank you for asking. Zach Johnston and Mateo Roberts are the composers of all the music, but they always composed all the music for the films Tonka House has done. And what's unique about them is they usually, right, composers come in the end and score to the picture. They came in early on, even before we started writing the final script. They were with us from the very beginning, providing, just based on the basic pitch, some drawings and paintings and some, general sort of vision. They wrote music. They call it sketches. And then we used some of them even in the final because it was so appropriate for our story. And in a way, the story was almost made, certain scenes are made to match their amazing score. Obviously, I had a challenge of having to create this Japanese themed score. They're from Wisconsin. But they studied Japanese music so much, and the highest compliment I heard is a lot of my friends in Japan who watched, they said they feel nostalgic with the music, and that's incredible. Like, two American composers from Wisconsin create something that feels nostalgic for Japanese people, and huge kind of kudos to those guys, and we were very lucky to work with some of the amazing taiko masters in Japan and then flute players.
Yeah, and we didn't do a full orchestra. We never had that in the plan, but we picked very important sounds, right, that we wanted to capture live. And taiko was one, and Japanese flute was another, and then we did, of course, all the chanting. That was a really fun exercise. Yeah. But it all came together and so beautifully. Yeah, I'm just listening to the soundtrack on repeat.
With the plethora of characters that you had in the show, are there any that made the cutting room floor that you kind of wish that you had put into the show, or did you have all the characters, or were all the characters were in the show all that were created?
No, we definitely had a lot more, but this particular story was so important to focus on Onari's journey, and then we just took out characters that didn't necessarily help support Onari's story, but...
Oh yeah, I mean, well, you have this amazing rendition of Namazu.
Catfish.
Yeah, who I think traditionally in folklore causes earthquakes.
Earthquakes,
okay,
yeah.
Yeah, I wanna see Namazu come to life.
I know, maybe season 2 if
Yeah.
we have the opportunity. Yeah.
That was actually going to be my question, if we were going to see any more beyond this.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage you to tell Netflix that you want it. I really do hope we have opportunity to expand our story, our world. There's just so much in the world of Japanese folklore and the world of Oni Thundergod's Tale, our version, and definitely there are a lot of ideas that we talked about that didn't make it to this particular story. So yeah, we hope so.
Yeah, well, I hope to see it continue, and even just to watch and appreciate the animation style that you have shown us through this. Like, I just hope it continues and that we see more of it.
Thank you.
But thank you guys very much for your time, and I from what I've seen of it, I've loved the project, and I do hope it continues. So Netflix, please. Please do it, and if anyone is interested, it is on Netflix right now, correct?
Yes.
That's right. Just opened yesterday.
Thank you.